There's a disturbing trend on YouTube concerning African Americans. There appears to be a number of them, I mean, literally thousands of them, who believe that they are the Aboriginal Americans. And most of this belief is based on the scientific evidence that the black man was on the planet at first. And by that rationale, then they must have been in the Americas first. Now, that's part true, but misleading. And I'm going to provide context probably in a later video concerning that. But a lot of African Americans have no proof of indigenous ancestry, yet they push this idea. Some of it comes from religious communities, such as the Moors, who believe that, well, I'm going to get to them a little later, but I'm just troubled by the overwhelming number of African Americans who are falling susceptible to this. So I've been waiting for someone to deal with this topic, and unfortunately I've been waiting for probably a year, and I just felt compelled to do something. So I'm going to put together a short video. It's probably going to be in like 3 to 4 parts, and I'm going to deal with just about every aspect of this phenomenon amongst African Americans who consider themselves indigenous. It's bad enough that a lot of the world think that black people are stupid, but thinking like this and beliefs such as this one cements that in the minds of so many other people. And I'm a proud black man, and I know my history very well, and I'm not ashamed of my history. And so I felt compelled to do something about it. So I'm going to deal, in this particular video, I'm going to deal with the geology. I'm going to talk about things that they bring up concerning to bolster their idea of Aboriginal status. So let me move to here. I'm going to click on to this phenomenon called Pangea. And I'm sure everyone has heard of it. Now, before I click on the video, let me give you a little background. Because a lot of them believe, and rightly so, that the black man was first, he crossed the continents when the land masses were together. Now, if you did any research whatsoever, you would know that during the time the continents were together, man did not exist. No human form existed. And as I roll this particular animation of Pangea, I'm going to stop it at a particular point and to further illustrate my point. Now, as you can see in the bottom, let me see, right here, let me see if I can get rid of that. In the bottom here, right here, you can see where it says 70 million years ago, right? But up here, it gives you the time period where, in fact, this coming together. Now, I'm going to pause it. Let me see if I can pause it right about here. One can argue that this is the time in which man crossed. But if you look at the time period, it's around 110 million years ago. Man was not around. Now, I'm going to move it ahead, and I want you to pay attention to this area right here, what happens here. Okay, let's move it over. Let's find it here and move it ahead. Now, just watch the period when it changes. And a word is going to appear that's going to be very familiar to you. Right here, Jurassic. Now, we all should know what Jurassic means. And I never known what Jurassic meant until the movie came out, Jurassic Park. And that was the time of the dinosaurs. Now, anybody know anything about science and anthropology and geology and all the sciences dealing with the earth, man was not around. So it couldn't have happened. So once again, if people just did a little research, they would know that. They wouldn't make an argument and embarrass themselves. It's embarrassing to say that man crossed into the North and South and Central America during the time of Pangea. It's impossible. So that's the idiocy that I see constantly on YouTube when we're dealing with this topic. Now, here's another area, and I was talking about the Moors earlier. Now, according to their Seven Circle Quran, it says that they came from Canaan, and the ancient name for them was Moabites from Moab. And then they moved into Africa or into Egypt. And the Pharaoh there gave them permission to basically go throughout the land and populate the land. And they first populated what is present-day Morocco, and they later populated the Americas by way of this mythical place right here called Atlantis. And supposedly they crossed Morocco into Atlantis and into North America and populated, or they came from here and moved down in here and they populated South and Central and North America. That's the story that they have. And then they said this all took place before a big earthquake sunk Atlantis. And then the continents became separate. There was no longer this land bridge that connected Africa to South, Central, and North America. Now, many of these people don't believe the slave trade existed, but they would believe in a mythical landmass as evidence that they were in the Americas first. Now, tell me, does that sound crazy or not? But yet, a lot of them believe that nonsense. So this is the problem I have with the Moorish Temple science believers who try to put themselves in the Americas when there's surely no evidence. Supposedly, yeah, like I said, an earthquake sunk it, and they don't give any chronology in terms of times when supposedly all this took place. So it's just totally ridiculous. So from what I understand, Plato was the first one to mention it around 360, I think it was 360 BC, was the first person that supposedly recorded that word Atlantis. And many people at that time believed it was a mythical place. Yet, Noble Drew Ali felt that it was necessary to put that in there. Now, some Moors might disagree with my interpretation, but there's a brother on YouTube who explained it exactly like that. I forget his name. It's not important what his name is, but I'm certain if you search YouTube, you will find this brother read from the Quran, the Circle 7 Quran, explaining exactly what I did, what I just explained to you. Now, I paraphrase some of it, but he reads it word for word, and I doubt that I veered off of what his main message was. So to me, that's a bunch of crock. So what I'm going to do, there's a map that's missing that I had up here. I don't see it right now, but let me click on it anyway. Now here you have South Carolina, and you have the Sea Islands. Now what's remarkable about these islands here is that this is where Africans were brought to cultivate mainly rice, right? And what makes this particular part of America history and this part of America different from the 13 colonies on the on the actually mainland is that these individuals on the Golan Islands kept a lot of their African culture. And this was done mainly because they had less contact with white people. Now, how is that possible? How did these slaves have less contact with white people? Let me explain to you how. Africans, especially from West Africa, many of them have the sickle cell trait. And if you're of the African American community, you're well aware of what that is. Now, sickle cell trait gives you the ability to, it prevents you from getting malaria or yellow fever. It's an immune mechanism that prevents that from happening. The problem with sickle cell is that sickle cell trait, if two people have sickle cell trait and have a child, that child is likely to develop sickle cell anemia, which is a very painful and horrible condition. So it's a flip of the dice. God forbid two people with the trait get together, have a child. That poor child may suffer badly. But because not every African American carries the trait, you're rolling dice, and maybe you get lucky. You have two people who get together. One may have it, and in other cases, none of the individuals may have it and produce a child with no problems. On the flip side of that, white people don't have sickle cell trait. So when they're in tropical areas, they're susceptible to sickness and death. And that's what was happening on these islands. During the tropical season, very hot summer months, during tropical season, white people were dropping off like flies. And so what they did, they became, like absentee landlords. They would come in the off season when it wasn't tropical and hot, and they would check on everything. Check on the crop, check on the progress of everything going on, make sure everything was going well. And as the tropical season would come about, they would leave. During that absence, those periods of absence, black people were able to keep many of their traditions, and they merged many of their languages and borrowed languages in order to create one language so that all the Africans could communicate together. Now, this is what should have happened on the mainland, but it didn't happen on the mainland because white people were more present on the mainland. Now, white people say, okay, let me see, the indigenous people will say that they are indigenous to all of America. Now, I wish I had the 13 colony thing put up. Let me go over here and do it real quick. If I can do it real quick and do the 13 colonies to show you this map that I don't know why it's not up. I had it. Let me see where it is. Okay. Now here's the point I'm making. Now, the indigenous people would have you believe that the white man rustled up all the indigenous people, turned them into slaves, made them forget about their culture, took away their language, their traditions, just stole everything. But yet, they tell you that they were all over America, all in the South and the Central, but they said they're aboriginals, they're indigenous to America. So let's just say there were no aboriginals in this part of the continent. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, there weren't. Let's say all the aboriginals were on the East Coast, which don't make no sense, but for the sake of argument, let's do it. Let's say the Europeans came in, wreaking havoc on the people, right? Brutalizing them, killing them, raping their women. Do you think for a moment there wouldn't be some Aboriginal people that would escape this area into the other parts of the land where the white man wasn't? Isn't that what's likely to happen? They did it here. When the Black Seminoles left Georgia and moved into Florida to flee the military, the United States military, and then when the military came into Florida again, when they left and they went into Mexico. That's what people do. Sometimes you can't sit there and fight. You have to run and regroup. So I would expect to see, given the fact that the Europeans came in here and did so much damage and took so much, that there should have been elements of this indigenous community that would have went into this area, hid out, maintained their culture and their land and their traditions. And that would be evident today. But there's no evidence of it today. I don't see not one person producing a culture that is so different from any other culture that's in America today. You don't see the Aboriginal community claiming Native American culture or identity in terms of Aboriginal status. They clearly say that they're different from the Native Americans. They say they're the first Native Americans. So they must have a distinct, unique culture and language and traditions all to his own. How come that didn't survive? They couldn't have killed every Aboriginal because you have people claiming that they're the descendants of the Aboriginals. So where are these people? They don't exist. It's a bunch of crock. That's what, in my opinion, that's what it is. Now, I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to go to the Gullah people or a Gullah representative and give you an idea of what you should see. Not the same language, but the same mixing of a culture or some element of an original culture. So I'm going to go to this particular and listen to this lady as she explains the story of the Gullah people.
Gullah and Geechee both are people. They are ethnic groups of people. In the Gullah Geechee Nation, we are one group of people from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida. So our nation encompasses all of what are called the Sea Islands and 30 to 35 miles inland to the St. Johns River. Now, Gullah is also a language. Now, from that language, like any other language of the world, you have a dialect. Geechee essentially is a dialect of the Gullah language. It is also what linguists would call the pidgin or bridge language. So if you heard Gullah, people are cracking teeth like this and thing like that, and yam, and thing like that, jokes and all that kind of wonder, then Gullah. But now when people start to give us the normal look, we get like, huh? People will say, okay, all right, okay, look y'all. Wine you want and thing like that, but get them, put it in, and bring them over here so we can have some for Napa this evening. Then you'll start to hear Geechee because people will start to now borrow words, take loan words from American English, not unlike Spanglish.
We were all these different tribes that spoke different languages. And so since we needed to communicate with each other to figure out, how are we going to figure our way out of this? One group isn't going to do it alone. So then we came up with, I like to call a common language. Gullah is a common language so that all of these different tribes can speak. You have some of us are descendants of Ashantis, Fulanis, Bassa, Crew, Mande, Malenke, Gizzy, Kizzy. So, we're really like about, depending on who you're speaking to, anywhere from maybe 15 to 20 different tribes. Some are Igbos, but we needed to speak to each other, so that was really Gullah. That's the language that we came up with. And like I said, between the Middle Passages and being on the Sea Islands, that's when we kind of created this new culture.
Well, Gullah and Geechee, the reason we have those terms is because of the African ethnic groups that were brought over during chattel enslavement that made the foundation for our culture. So we had Angolans who first arrived here directly from the motherland, that their name got cut off, it got sort of denigrated into just being shortened to Ngullah. But when they sold our people on auction blocks, they would say, well, I have a cargo of Gullah for sale. So you first got that usage of the term Gullah about the people, but from Angolans.
To be Gullah is to be.
So my point is, where are an example of that mixing west of the 13 colonies? It doesn't exist. So that tells me that this whole Aboriginal ideology is fabricated. It's not real. Because you should see some representative of an Aboriginal culture, tradition, and language west of the 13 colonies, and you see nothing. No one can produce it. No one can tell you what language they spoke, what tradition they have, what they believe. Nothing. They're just relying on skin color. The only thing they're right about is skin color. But in a future video, I'm going to go into that and explain to you that those individuals aren't you. Okay? At least the masses, the majority of black people are not related to those dark-skinned people that the Europeans saw when they came to the New World. Okay, now here's another interesting thing, and I'm gonna end this video. Everyone knows what this is. This represents the Nina Pinta and Santa Maria. I'm going to go into more detail when I go into another part of the video when I'm talking about the questions that many of the Aboriginal people ask as proof that there was no slave trade. And the number one question they ask is, where are the ships? Where are the ships that brought us here? How come there's no ships that we can look at? So obviously, if they can't produce no ships, any ships, therefore, there was no slavery. There was no transatlantic slave trade. It was a big hoax. Now, in fairness, that's just one question out of maybe, I think, 6 or 7 that they ask. And when they add up all the questions together, they come with their understanding is that it's all a hoax. But I'm going to chip away at all of that in a future video. But I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to address the number one question right here, and with just common sense. And this is what my approach is about. Common sense. Okay? So, everybody knows what these ships are. The Nina Pinta and Santa Maria. Now, ask yourself this question. Where are those ships? Now remember, they're saying because those ships don't exist, these slave ships don't exist, that proves that they're Aboriginal. That's their message. Because how else, we obviously we didn't get here on those ships, so we must have already been here. So ask yourself the question, where is the Santa Maria, Pinta, and the Nina? Where are those ships? If you Google it, they say they ran aground not too long ago after they were commissioned. They no longer exist. Now, if you apply the same logic you apply to the African hoax, slave trade hoax, then you would have to come away with the idea that, or the possibility that the European is indigenous to the Americas. But you're not willing to go there. But you can't produce they can't produce their ships. So why can't they claim indigenous status? Why can't they? We don't know where their ships are. You said that there was no way they could come over crossing the Atlantic because it was too choppy. Remember those explanations? So if it was too choppy, then obviously the European must be indigenous, just like you. But you don't believe that, do you? Indigenous people, you don't believe that. No. One brother came up with some theory that the European didn't cross the Atlantic. He went up the coastline of Europe, England, Scottish, and Ireland, and hugged the coastline of Greenland and Canada, and came down that way. Now that's just stupidity. Who's going to travel? Hundreds of people or thousands of people are going to travel up into the North Atlantic where it's frigid cold. And let's be clear, those oceans aren't calm up there either. If you go on YouTube, you could look for rough waters in the North Atlantic, and you'll see the same thing that they provide you with. It's no difference. There's calm waters everywhere, and there's rough waters everywhere. A great navigator knows when to navigate. That's the bottom line. So, that's all I'm going to do on this video. Like I said, I'm going to deal with, in a later video, I'm going to deal with the identity of the Aboriginal people, who they are, what's been scientifically proved, as to their identity, and I'm going to hopefully chip away at the nonsense that is being brought forth by so many in this community of Aboriginal thinkers. Like I said, if the old saying, if you throw a brick in a pack of dogs and the one that yelps is the one that got hit, then yeah, I'm talking to you. But if you really do have, and you could truly prove that you have native ancestry or so-called Aboriginal ancestry, then I'm not talking to you. You shouldn't get offended. I'm talking to the knuckleheads who have no proof and that would assume an identity that is not their own. Like and subscribe, share if you like. I'll be back at you.